All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. So it is early in the January 2023 season. Been able to achieve currently rank 51, but I was rank 46 just a few moments ago. I was able to achieve this by playing just a very consistent few decks. If you looked at my last video, things have not changed very much. I'm essentially playing the exact same decks, although I have tweaked the lists just a little bit. So let's go ahead and run through a few other pieces of information here. So by far and large, the deck I played most was mono white soldiers. Second most was mono black. I was playing a more life gain oriented build. And then third, I was playing a little bit of mono blue and mono red as well. I played a mixture of best of ones and best of threes or traditional. Either one felt just fine. I was able to walk away with a similar win rate from both formats. So if you find that you're winning more, it may be beneficial to just play best of ones. But that's really just preference. It's up to you. You'll have to learn how to sideboard if you aren't familiar with playing traditional. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the lists here. So again, if you looked at my last video, you may have noticed that I also played a ton of mono white soldiers. In fact, that was my recommendation. So mono white soldiers is an incredibly good deck. Let me go ahead and move myself there. So it's versatile. I literally did not change anything on this list. It's very quick. You have good removal. If anything, you could, depending on what you're running into on the ladder, less mono red, you can maybe throw away a lay down arms for a Wandering Emperor for mid-range matchups. The removal is just a little more guaranteed, and you have a threat that can help you close out the game. This list is still incredibly consistent in best of ones. My difficulties came with this deck whenever I was playing up against Grixis midrange or Azorius Soldiers. Both of those decks are absurdly powerful. The reason, honestly, Azorius Soldiers is by far and large the best aggro deck in the format, don't get me wrong. The reason I do not like to play Azorius Soldiers is simply because it's not fast enough. I want to be able to get to the top of the ladder as quickly as possible, and Azorius Soldiers might be a little more consistent than everything else, mostly due to the Sky Striker, but it's also going to be slower. So you have to weigh your advantages and disadvantages, your pros and cons. And in my opinion, Azorius Soldiers is amazing. If I was going to a tournament standard tomorrow, honestly, Azorius Soldiers would be what I would queue up with or register with. But on the arena ladder, I think consistency is going to be more important. Now, Grixis midrange, if I expect to see or Grixis control, if I expect to see a lot of Azorius soldiers, that's going to be a phenomenal option as well. Honestly, Grixis and Azorius didn't completely wipe me out every time I played up against it, but the vast majority of my losses came to Azorius soldiers. Grixis was slightly in their favor, let's say, 55-45. Whereas Azorius Soldiers, pretty much every time I played that deck, I was 60-40 to lose. So it is what it is. I'll let you take that with a grain of salt. I noticed that a lot of the Azorius Soldiers lists, and I have one here. I don't have the wild cards made up for it because I haven't played this deck. If you notice here, they are playing a lot of the Denix, so keep that in mind. If you are playing mono red, you want to have access to a fair amount of lightning strikes or obliterating bolts for this card. Otherwise, anything else, you're mono white or mono black, you do not really care about this card. This is the only card that you care about in most of those slower matchups is the Sky Strike Officer. This card is absurd. This card is insane. Thalia is also quite good. A lot of these lists, though, it's playing Spectrum Sentinel at 1 mana. This is to try to shore up your matchup a little bit against those, seeing a lot of Naya builds on the ladder for some reason, also Grixis. So a lot of people playing Triomes, you're going to gain a fair amount of life with this. Although against those matchups, you don't really need to gain that much life, so I don't like the Spectrum Sentinel. Instead, what I saw being much more successful were actually decks that were playing the Make Disappear, the 2-mana counterspell. It's just a catch-all against everything. Later in the game, you can sack like Myral tokens to it or something like that if you have to, if you need the casualty on it. But playing the 2-mana counterspell in that slot instead was destroying me almost every single game. So do keep that in mind if you choose to go with the Azorius Soldiers. Otherwise, other decks that I played, mono black. Played a fair amount of mono black. So I do like playing this build here, although you have a few options right now. In fact, let me go ahead and change up this deck compared to what I would probably be playing right now. So the Okiba Reckoner Raid, I highly recommend this deck, and it looks like my arena probably crashed here. Nope, it's back. So the Okiba Reckoner Raid is extraordinarily good, and so you're going to keep a small curve like this, and this is going to essentially keep you really competitive with mono red, which you're going to see a lot of right now on the ladder. Infernal Grasp, you could go down on Infernal Grasp, go up a go for the throat if you want, but I like having these removal heavy builds. Liliana is not as good right now. You could even go down to 1 and up a Graveyard Trespasser for the full playset if you're really encountering a lot of mono red. That is entirely up to you. With that being said, though, I think you have a lot of really great options. Invoke Despair is fine. The Flesh Gorgers are great. But you can, work with your 3 mana spells as much as you want to. It's entirely up to you. And then, of course, you're rounding off the whole thing with Shieldred. You're not going to have much difficulty with this deck. I like playing the 4 cut down. However, I think having the full play set is essentially where you want to be on the arena ladder as of right now. I can't imagine playing anything less than 4. This is going to destroy everything pretty much in Azorius Soldiers, mono white soldiers, mono red aggro. Anything you're going to see, especially on the best of 1 ladder, is going to be covered by this card, and this card is a beating whenever it comes to Etching of Kumano. If mono red plays that and they try to turn 2 to sneak through anything cut down to have for their Phoenix Chick or anything like that they put the counter onto, can be just a complete beating. So do keep that in mind. So 4 cut down is pretty much a guaranteed inclusion for me at this point, so keep that in mind on your climb to Mythic for this season. Okay, so in terms of my other builds here, so again, I would probably recognize or recommend mono red next. This is the exact build. I would not make any changes. I would play this exact build here. The deck is insane. It's very powerful. It's not as good as the other decks that I showed you, in my opinion. However, I believe this to be the best iteration of mono red at the moment. So I do have a few little flex slots here. So you have a Feldon and an Obliterating Bolt. You can work with those 2 flex slots as you see fit. I would keep it at something at 1 or 2 mana though, because we are on the heavier side with this mono red deck. We have 6 3-drops and 4 4-drops. So that's the reason why we are playing 23 lands. The key to this deck is basically overwhelming your opponent on turn 2 with your massive amounts of 1-drops here. It's incredibly important to be able to double spell on turn 2, which is why we are not messing around with the Mishras. We don't want the creature lands in this deck. It makes the mana way too inconsistent to be able to double spell on turn 2. So that's why we're packing the full 23 red sources, all coming in untapped, 22 basics with a Sokinzen. You could maybe play a second Sokinzen instead of the 22nd Mountain. However, this should be just fine. This is what I've been playing, and this is what I recommend. Every single threat has haste in this deck, or damages your opponent directly. It's really hard for most decks to match the pressure if you're on the play. On the draw can be a completely different story, and the mono red matchups are actually really dynamic. However, whoever is able to resolve a turn 1 Kumano will normally win the mono red mirror match. So again, this deck is really great. So if you like something really fast, this is it. Your games will be over the quickest out of any of the other decks. So if you're just looking to grind through the ladder quickly, maybe this will be your choice. If you want a more consistent grind, play mono white. If you want something that's sort of a catch-all, play mono black. And if you want a much slower grind, but you want a lot of consistency, which with a lot of interaction and full combination, fun combinations, then you may want to play Azorius Soldiers. So I didn't play Azorius Soldiers, so I'm not going to show you a list. I'll let you find one of those online that's going to work for you based on the wild cards and everything that you have. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can go check out my last one from the previous season to see how things change between now and then. that season was much more difficult for me. This one I pretty much blasted right through. I had close to an 80% win rate. It only took me about 4 hours or so to get to Mythic. Again, I was Mythic last season, so I started at Platinum just a few days ago. Did not have to play that much, so this really was an awesome experience. And let's go ahead and we'll save and exit here. Curious as to, okay, so I moved to 52, so I have to get back onto the rank grind and potentially even go for a rank 1 this season. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.